Good morning, ladies, gentlemen. Welcome also to Tia and Linda, my co-presenters. And so what we thought we'd do is really put our money where our mouth is and do the what you might want to call flipped classrooms or multimodal approaches or whatever we want to call it. And we're going to ask you guys to use the chat box in the side and to put there what you consider the issues and debates that we need to debate about. In our plans last night, Linda, Eugenia, and I discovered that, at least not Eugenia, Linda, and Tia and I discovered quite quickly that we have quite enough to debate about anyway. Some of you may, I see Pam says here in the chat that she's one of my past students. Linda, I'm going to out you as being also one of my past students. And I'm going to tell them the story about Norway when I was sitting there as a visiting professor, and Professor Irma Elof was the co-supervisor. And Irma and I, between the two of us, had a little competition about who could respond quickest to any comment coming from Linda. And Linda really knew how to abuse this competition because she started sending us, first she sent a page, and then within half an hour, Irma or I would respond. And eventually it got to a stage where Linda would send a sentence and expect an instant result on her sentence. And I found that I was not being a visiting scholar in Bergen and walking and getting to know Norway. I was sitting at my desk waiting for Linda's questions. And I then said, stop doing this. And, and Linda sent back and said, I don't care what your position is. I am now finishing my doctorate, and when I need help, I need that immediately. So that's why I thought it really cool to have Linda here, because she knows how to do client pushback from the other side. So thank you. And while I'm doing all this jabbering, I'm hoping that some of you, Heinrich is asking whether I'll be handing out virtual Smarties. Curses, when I do these things, I have usually my wife sits on the other side, and she's the one who uploads the Smarties. So I'm in trouble. I don't have virtual Smarties. I'll have to look for them. It doesn't matter. But I'm beginning to see something happening, though, from what Heinrich is saying, is digital Smarties, the whole idea of motivation. How do you actually give somebody some sort of feedback, some digital reward, as it were? And I was thinking, one could even send somebody some e-wallet money, and then they have to, they could go and buy their own Smarties or so. So I wouldn't know. Okay, I see there we've got the digital divide. Can I start with the digital divide? I've got student resilience. This is good stuff, or the lack of it. I've got social learning. I've got online pedagogy and assessment. And we've got staff training. Okay, I think maybe we must pause the issues for a bit, because that's enough to keep us going for hours and hours and hours already. Time difference, old thinking rules. Pam, let's, I must also just tell you about Pam, who I taught a class 2 evenings a week. And Pam was in Cape Town, and she wanted to attend my class. And I said, well, there's no way that you can fly up 2 evenings a week. And so we stopped having the old thinking, and we said 2 evenings a week times 4 hours, or 2 evenings of 2 hours per week translates to the same as Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we simply moved that course so that Pam could fly up for 6 times, and she got a good deal from South African Scareways. So there, we were forced by the need just to think another way. But I think the most critical, and I want to tie Pam's old thinking rules, and I want to take that to the other thing that somebody was asking about, which is assessment. Because I'm going to make a controversial statement here and say, with information as readily available as it is, you can get anything you need by Googling for it. What are we still doing trying to teach people stuff? I'm currently teaching a research methodology course, and when it came to the statistics part, I went on to LinkedIn Learning, to which my university subscribes, and I prescribed a module and said to students, do this module and upload your certificate of completion, and I will give you 10 marks for that. I'm not going to teach that. But here's the thing. The only thing that we really still have something over is assessment, because students can get information anywhere, but where do they get the accreditation? And so I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to ask Linda and I'm going to Tia. I'm going to ask Linda and Tia just to pop in and give us some information about. Here is somebody. My stance: if you can't find it on Google, then I will assess how you will use the information. Yep, it's how you find the stuff. But let's talk about the assessment, Linda and Eugenie. Some things that you think we should talk about.
Yes, Johannes, I have such strong opinions about the Jolly assessment thing. I read something on Facebook the other day where one of my colleagues at UJ mentioned that one of the students did exactly that, that Lizelle has mentioned. They said, yeah, Prof, why do you penalize us if we find the answers on Google? You should penalize yourself for asking silly questions that can be answered by Googling. And I thought, gosh, if our students are starting to say that, isn't it time that we really rethink what we do and how we do it? I think one of there are so many programs now, especially for the last 18 or so months, that had looked into assessment and ways that we can replicate what we have in normal face-to-face circumstances, fully online, with proctoring programs and software jumping up everywhere. And whilst I understand that there might be certain areas where it's relevant, certainly there are disciplines and sometimes professional bodies require certain strictly regulated testing and assessment environments. I do think we've moved away from that over the last 18 months, and I'm hoping that there's a broader acceptance of rethinking the way in which we assess rather than replicating the old ways of doing.
Tia, anything from your side?
You know, I wanted to just give you a little bit of our experience. Sorry, I'm just uploading now a profile picture because somehow I can't get my video to go, although everything is clicked. So one of the experiences that I think we need to think about is the role that administration. So in our case at UJ, the central administration, in many places they call the examinations office, are playing. And so there was all through lockdown a sort of tug of war between three parties: the lecturers, let me call them the examinations office, and then those of us, let me call it the instructional designers. So what central admin is most worried about is the integrity of degrees, and they have just one solution, and that's a technology solution. Yeah. And so we had to really push back to say, wait, guys, and Linda, you said it very nicely, can we not just design better? And so from the ID side, we were pushing, let's look at how we design. That's the first thing. Then secondly, proctoring is actually very expensive, and there's a whole lot of reasons not to use it, particularly when students are new to it and they don't understand who is watching them. And so in our engagement with our SRC numerous times, the biggest worry was, why do you want to see what my room looks like? And so that was an interesting point. The minute we said to students, wait, for the few students, about 1,000 and later on 2,000 of our 40,000 undergraduates, we used proctoring with a video on. And we said, we will not ask you to show us a 360. And I still need to get my head around it, but that was a really important thing for students, is that people must not see what their rooms look like. Secondly, I think it was really important to say to students, listen, there's not a person on the other side watching you. And so on a higher level, it is students' lack of understanding and lecturers and central admin on different levels of what assessments are really for and why are we assessing, how should we assess. And I think the assessment issue can keep us busy for the rest of the day. Let me just quickly say one last thing. What we did at the end was to recommend levels of, let me say, invigilation. So we used Turnitin for the many take-home exams. So design first, then Turnitin for the take-home exams. Then on another level, we had an app called the Invigilator. Some of you may know about it. It was developed by some UJ accounting lecturers that records audio and has a OTP in the middle where you have to just type it in and take a picture of yourself to make sure that you are the person that started the exam and that you are the right person. And then for some students, as I say, at the end 2000, we used Proctorio. And then for the mathematics students, we had them come onto campus because we could not figure out, we even talked to you guys at UP, how do we stop students from using check? So as fast as the maths exams were available to students, so fast they were sending the queries to check and got the answers and shared them. And that was a real challenge for online in mathematics and statistics. I'm just going to stop here. Linda, over to you.
I've just mentioned my topic, my input there in the chat room as well. I do think that I agree that there's a space and a place for proctoring, but I still argue that I think if we restructure and rethink the way in which we assess, that we can reach those higher levels of assessment that we want to aim for anyway. We found that with continuous assessment in our fully online programs that it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
You regularly see the students now, you talk to them on they need to do certain things on a regular basis. And it's very hard to get someone else to cheat for you continuously.
Yes. Can the academic in me talk about this for a brief moment? What we're really talking about is the two things that in academia we always look for, and that is called reliability and validity. And what continuous assessment gives you, Linda, is reliability, because you're testing the student's knowledge lots and lots and lots of little times. And then it's very easy for you statistically to see whether those results are the same. If a student is a 60%er, then every assignment of that student should be approximately 60%. If the student suddenly takes a dive, then you know the student must have had something wrong. If the student suddenly does a huge increase in grades, then you know the student probably had a consultant help with that work. And so and then you can start testing that. So that's the first one, the reliability. The problem that I have with proctored exams is that its validity is absolutely zero, because you are not testing whether the student is able to do a sum. You are testing whether the student is able to do a sum under extremely stressful conditions with electronic surveillance all around that student. So there goes the validity of that assessment. And that's why I've also liked what people were talking about with authentic assessment, because that is the testing of validity. In the department where I currently am, the IT department, we have a problem that students can go and access code through various code sharing places. So if you want to write a piece of code that does X, then you go to SourceForge or whatever it's called, and you can download that code and put it in. And so one of our lecturers decided that this is really bad, that students can suddenly can just cut and paste things into their exams and so on. And he went and he found on SourceForge, whatever the thing is called, he found some source code that he could paste into Blackboard, And that would stop any possibility of cutting and pasting into Blackboard. And then he made a little video about this code and how it works and so on. And when that was over, I threatened to actually have him charged with unethical behavior, because he went and stole code or accessed code, did not cite where he accessed that code from, pasted it into Blackboard, all to prevent students from doing exactly that. How ironic can you be? So this comes back to the other thing. If you can type a difficult mathematical problem into Google and Google will give you the solution, then why are we still trying to teach our student to do that complicated mathematical problem? You know, just one of them, and because when I had to do manage cost accounting, I decided that I'm not going to do an MBA anymore. And the reason for that is they wanted to make me learn the formula for determining the time value of money. To determine the time value of money, you simply type into Google, how much was 250 Rand worth in 1980? And Google will tell you. I don't need to go to an MBA to learn that. Okay, I've done enough talking about that. I think we had a lot of good chats in the side here. There's somebody asking about peer evaluation. Peer evaluation is brilliant if you do it, if you have the right things in how you make your peers evaluate, because peers are very scared of giving each other different marks. So what I do with students when they do peer evaluation, I would say to them, you need to look at, so say I'm teaching life skills and they have to do a CV. Then I'd say, okay, in groups of 6, arrange these CVs like shortlisting from the best to the worst CV, and then send me those CVs with the names in sequence as you shortlisted them. And now they have to rank, and so they've got to fight with each other and make something. And then I decide the top 2 of the so it's 6. I then decide the top 2 are beyond expectations, the bottom 2 are pass, the next 2 are sort of good pass, and the top 2 are distinction, or whatever I do. But then you get the students to engage with one another critically. What makes educators teach and assess useless knowledge? The answer to that is it's easy to teach and assess useless knowledge. To this very day, I still don't know why I have to know Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Linda, over to you.
Yeah, I do think that we have to be realistic and know that if we ask silly questions, students are going to get it ready. As you heard, for my sons, I'm a house parent at one of the male residences here at the university, and I find it amusing to see when they're writing tests. They all live in the same, everyone who studies engineering, for example, is in the same corridor. And so what they would have is a WhatsApp group. So they would each sit in their own rooms in front of their own computers, but they would have this WhatsApp group going. And then someone would say, on the question of this, do I use this formula? And then the others would answer yes, and then they would paste what they've done. So honestly, we have no idea whether it is really the students' work. And so once again, there's no reason for us to ask questions that can be copied and pasted. We have to find a way to get the students to really connect. And Prof Johannes, as you were saying, the authenticism of our assessment is not asking what are the 5 things, or do this or do that. You want them to discuss. You want them to have access to their resources. A veterinary science, a veterinarian in a practice would never, from memory only, remember that for a Maltese poodle of 5 kilograms of weight, they need to put so much of this in there or not. There's just no way. They would go to Google and quickly look, or they will open up their book and double check. We have to give our students the opportunity to use the resources that they have to really make a good decision. And then peer evaluation becomes valuable, because then it is, exactly. We learn from one another, and we use each other as resources, and then we benefit from that willingness of them to really get together, rather than trying to punish them for getting together and learn together.
So
Exactly.
Linda,
So,
I just want to link,
yeah,
Johannes, let me just link to Linda. So Linda,
yeah,
you actually pointing it out very nicely. Students are not the problem. You know, the academics are. It's very, very difficult to turn that ship around because we tend to teach the way we were taught. And as we roll out the PG dips, things will probably change. And I hope that the last 18 months, and in fact, that's what we observed. The last 18 months was a steep learning curve. But it is, so one of the issues is the narrative of over-assessment when you want to use continuous. And of course, you're right. Continuous is the best. And we use it in our fully online HEPSA programs very successfully. But it was very difficult to get that message across. Anyway, that is a really important point. The other thing I thought we should talk about is how do you change the conversation with your academic staff that it is not lowering standards to continuous assess, to work online, not to ask for, they don't think learning a formula is rote learning. We have experience with that. When we ask certain environments, why don't you ask students not just authentic, but more application types questions? Then people think, yes, but then they say, no, we need to know the basics. The students need to know the basics. And then the basics means actually that it's rote learning. And how do we change that conversation? Because I think for all of us going more and more online, that is something we need to think about.
I want to add to that, Tia. I think what you said is brilliant, because we need to change our mindset with that. I had an interesting conversation with a lecturer yesterday who accused the student of cheating because the student had a multiple choice test on Blackboard and the lecturer had not set the number of times that you could do the test. And so the student did the test 25 times until the student obtained full marks. Now the lecturer says that's cheating because now you got yourself full marks. I'm saying, hang on, what are we testing with that student? Over and above the fact that the student had to do that test until she got full marks, she also has the tenacity of doing something 25 times. That student deserves that mark more than anybody else. And so it is the way in which we need to change the way we think about that. And I want to go back to what Linda said, because I think we're now moving, and I'm liking what we're doing. We're moving towards saying, well, is our teaching and learning not what needs to change also, so that the teaching and learning and the assessment becomes the same thing? And we're looking at portfolio based, because what you're talking about, Linda, those engineers who share the stuff, I saw that happen once in a class where I gave a Blackboard test. Students could work from home or they could come in, and I sat at the back. And I saw students form little groups behind the computer, physical groups, coaching their buddies to get full marks, because the top guy in the class and the top lady in the class were trying to beat one another to get to full, but not only to get to full marks, but to get to full marks first. And so they were sitting there. And of course, there's another thing that you can do is set your Blackboard so that it gives the average and not the best mark. But that, I wanted that to happen. I wanted them to cheat, because it's sort of, call it reverse psychology, if you like. They engage with each other. I use competition. I use curiosity. I use challenge. I use all those things that Malone tells us we should be using to get that hemming. So that's the one. The other thing that we need to look at is a move towards a portfolio-based assessment, where because if you look at what we find, where do people record their learning now? On their LinkedIn profile. And people record every piece of learning. I mean, I even put on my competent crew certificate that means that I cannot sail a yacht. That's on my LinkedIn. Because there might be somebody who says, hey, this is a professor who doesn't get seasick. Maybe I can ask him to come and do a conference on a boat or something. So every single skill we have, we want to register somewhere. And I think it's our job as educators to create those challenges, those environments in which students put in. And somebody earlier here said, we need to change it so that the student has the responsibility to convince us of the authenticity of what the student has. And I like that, that we simply, that we need to create learning experiences, the product of which will be proof that the student has obtained that or has mastered that skill. And I'm going to pause again. Oh, can I advertise? Learning Landscape is going to be online and free, and it's on the 27th for the whole day, and I'm just putting the link in there. Ha ha. The opportunity in me.
No, absolutely. As you were talking, I was thinking of how we tend to focus on the basics. Lecturers normally they want to teach the basics so that you can build on it for later. But then often time runs out and you never get to that to build on later. And this is also maybe a little bit controversial, but in thinking of how we need to change this. And with technology, we now can, because of the flipped classroom potential and all of that, it certainly is possible for us to say, well, let's let students get the basics on their own, in their own time, their free time. Because if we want them to solve a really complicated problem, they need that formula before they can actually get to the point where they solve it. But we don't need to teach them the formula. We can show them how, we can make it available to them with the basics. We can teach them in videos with, even little, much of these interactive videos nowadays, you can stop them halfway, ask them little questions. Those kinds of things doesn't have to be part of our job anymore. That is something that we set up earlier. Obviously, we design the learning, we make it happen earlier. But then in class, we really deal with the issues, with the complications. Why did this not work? Why do we have different answers? Where did we go wrong? What was the thinking patterns that made us go wrong? Much rather than teaching the formula and step-by-step modeling the sort of way. So I do think we need to move away from that focusing on the low-level things, because we need to build on it. Let the students focus in their own time on those low-level things. And when we do have contact with them, whether it is face-to-face in a synchronous session like this, or if it is in a bulletin board or a forum of sorts, then we deal with the real issues that they struggle with when they start applying it. So immediately we focus our time on that top level of activities rather than the basics.
So if I can quickly share with you the way in which I apply exactly what you're saying, Linda. I get doctoral students wanting to study with me all the time, and I'm just not going to get the basics. They can do the basics themselves. So what I made is a website called My Free Online Doctoral Program. And if you go to that, you find before you start how to enter the field, literature review, proposal, fieldwork, etc., etc. And it takes about 8 or 9 weeks to get. So I teach them how to do a literature review with Atlas TI. I've got some videos of how to reduce a paragraph, how to write, how to make a summary, and then even a proposal generator that you simply click and fill in the blanks, and it'll give you a little proposal. And I tell, there it is, the ABC Instant Proposal Generator. You click on that, get a Google form, fill that in, and it'll give you a proposal. And so after I say to a student, go away, work through my online doctoral program until you get to having your own free program, at least until you have your own proposal, and then send me that proposal. Now that gives me an 8-week test whether that student has enough tenacity to work on their own before coming to approach me. It also gives them all the basics, and it costs me nothing, because it's just a free website, a Google site that's out there. So that's, I think, what we also mean about getting students to do the basics on their own. I've now lost, I'm so busy looking at my screen that I can't see the comments. Okay, I've got the comments. More comments, questions from anybody?
Johannes,
Tia, you've been very quiet.
it's Tia here. I
Yes.
want to quickly just take issue with something your Deputy Vice Chancellor said, and that is that fully online programs will is cost effective. But actually, Linda, did you not find with the HEPSA programs, and that is now going forward too, is that it's, and also the last 18 months, that it's very time intensive, that it's actually quite expensive to not only develop these fully online programs, but to run them. The idea that students will just learn by themselves, you just put the stuff up there without having people present as a guide or a mentor or an instructor, is really a fallacy. And I think our managers need to realize that the fully online ideal as a solution for our financial issues is not that simple. Starting with postgraduate students, particularly if you start with honors and master's programs, not necessarily the PG DIPs or the advanced diplomas, is the supervision cost. So if you don't scale, you don't make money. And if you scale, you need many, many more people, particularly in the postgraduate environment. And I think that's something we lose sight of. It's maybe a different issue when you focus on continuous education programs or short learning programs. I think there's an opportunity for making money. If we don't do that ourselves as universities or as conglomerates of universities like you see in Australia and in India and in other places, we will lose the market to all of the Coursera's. There are so many different companies now trying to get a piece of our students. And I think that's something on another level that we also have to consider. Okay, over to you, Johannes.
Thank you, Tia. I just posted something in there in the comments saying Diana Laurillard in Rethinking University Teaching, which was written in the early 90s, said education does not scale. You can scale some things. You can scale the textbook. You can convert a textbook into a computer-based training program or so. But at some stage, you need to have the high touch, high quality happening. And so I don't know the answer to what you're saying, but I also do. I think we see a lot of the answer in big group, small group stuff, and I think we're not noticing enough of what happened during 2020 when the plague got at its worst. Those students who could get along, those of us who were teaching large groups, we simply let those students who could get along go along. Run, guys. It's on Blackboard. I'm opening all the tests for you. Do it at your own speed. Do it as fast as you can. That frees me up to go and find that individual student sitting somewhere in a township having only WhatsApp available. And then I can go on a one-on-one with that student, ask that student to WhatsApp his assignment to me, and I will upload it into Blackboard if needs be. But I can only do that high-level quality touch with that student if I allow the fast students to run ahead. And that's where flexi learning becomes a really, really good alternative. And I want to put something else out there, and that is that this whole idea that we currently have, that online learning is more expensive than face-to-face learning, is just absolute rubbish. You will remember, Linda, that when you and I and Son did those in 1997, when we did our first online classroom, Dolph Stein lived in what was then called, I think, Germiston or something like that, thereabouts, Alberton. It was cheaper for him to go and buy a modem and buy telephone time than it would have been for him to drive into class. And if we start doing our learning in such a way that it can work on a mid-range cell phone, which most bits of learning can, then anybody can learn anywhere. Just do the costing. Sit at home with a reasonably expensive laptop and buy airtime, or travel 500 kilometers to a university, pay residence fees, pay additional expenses, pay travel expenses, still buy a laptop because you're going to need it. it's way more expensive to come to contact than it is to be at a distance.
However, Johannes, however, let me just, sorry, Linda, to interrupt you there. It depends who your student body is. We found, I just looked at our stats for last year. It was a very large survey. 2/3 of students want blended. They want to come here. They don't necessarily want to come sit in a class, but they want to leave their environments and they want to come to school, as they say, stay here, have the Wi-Fi, the social life, the city experience, and so on. So yes, I agree with you. It is not expensive for the student necessarily. In fact, the student can save a lot. I mean, it's expensive for the university. There's this idea that you will save cost by having lots of online programs. And I don't know, Linda, you must come in here with your experience with your with HEPSA. We've learned lots of lessons there. Of course, we all now think we know what we're doing and want to go on our own, but it's also not that simple. Over to you, Linda.
Well, I must say, I always look at the budget of a company to see what their priorities are. So it does also say, you know, put your money where your mouth is. If the universities decide that going online and introducing fully online programs, then they'll have to ensure that there is a budget for it. In ideal life, there's always early adopters, people like, you know, most probably the people that are in this room today are the guys who are keen on using technology, will take a little bit of a risk, has that grit and tenacity to overcome the small little, you know, things that go wrong, as it always does with technology. And they will do it whether they get paid for it or not. They will do it whether it fits in with their lifestyle or not. They will just make sure that it happens. But to get that momentum going and to really ingrain that as part of the institutional university concept, what it is that we're teaching and how we're teaching, you probably need to put some money down. And we've definitely, in how we set it up on our side, the university did give some seed funding for the initial programs to just get it up and running. And now I'm not even sure if some of our colleagues are here that are teaching in those programs. We've set up the financial system as such that the departments themselves benefit financially from the income that's generated, not from the subsidy. Obviously, the subsidies go straight to the university to cover the overarching costs. But the tuition fees, we've set up our system so that the money goes back to the department that actually does the work. And that creates the opportunity for those departments to then appoint more people, appoint more tutors to help with the assessment, and to just give them a little bit of wiggling room in terms of their academic goals and focus as well. So definitely for a start, I think any institution who wants to go with fully online learning needs to understand that it doesn't just mean you annotate one PowerPoint, put it up there, and now your course is online. It's way more comprehensive than that, and that takes time. And therefore, we have to put in the seed funding to get that lecturer maybe released for a couple of weeks so that they can focus on this, or give them at least some tutor support so that they are not so busy with marking, but they can focus on the development of the work. But once it is in place, you know, obviously one would revisit every now and then just to check that you're still on board. But once the basics is in place, you can easily then scale it up for larger groups. So I think it does mean that we need to revisit the ways in which we budget at universities. But certainly, you know, to put the momentum there, you need a little bit of money.
I want to just show, I just said I'll give Tia some smarties because she was mentioning the thing that we've conveniently sort of forgot, and that is the campus experience. The fact that at some stage somebody is going to pour some washing powder into the fountain and there will be bubbles all over the fountain, campus security will be cross, or those sort of pranking, that sort of stuff, that is what makes us students. But you know, that's more expensive than sitting and learning from home. So what we also need to start looking at is the online experience design. What most universities did when we suddenly had to go online is we moved our teaching and learning online, and then eventually we got to moving our graduation ceremony online. Now, what we had at my university, in my faculty, was we have a celebration of masters and doctoral students before they graduate. We call it a robing ceremony, where the parents of the masters and doctoral graduates actually put their academic gowns on them. And we have a little ceremony. The supervisor introduces the student to the dean. The student tells us of the student's research journey, and the significant others put the gown on the student so that the student is ready to go down and graduate. Beautiful little ceremony. We combine it with a breakfast or a lunch just before the ceremony. And that suddenly disappeared. And what we discovered is that Zoom gives us the opportunity to have just about everybody in a little window, unmuting themselves, putting their pictures there. And we ran a fantastic 2-hour party on Zoom. So we have to realize that it is the whole learning experience that we need to design for when we do this. And we need to, if we're going to go fully online, then we need to replicate the entire university fully online. And that's where your discussion group, WhatsApp groups work incredibly well. I wrote a paper called WhatsApp and Social Closeness at a Time of Social Distance, because I think most of you who belong to community WhatsApp groups will know how those groups exploded during the heaviest part of lockdown. People were so alone at their houses, they needed to talk to the neighbors. So we need to look at how we make that student, how we make that whole learning experience an online experience.
I'm thinking of our Kummer Space option that we have throughout this conference. You'll see during the lunch breaks and the tea breaks, we've set up Kummer Space. We've just used the free version, so but it is such a fabulous way of replicating, in a sense, that scenario that one needs, where you, on conferences, you would go and stand by the pool with your glass of wine and you'll chat to someone that you would never have thought you would, and you don't know them. When you start talking to them, you realize, oh, it's someone I've actually read about, or I've actually quoted this guy. And then, you know, it's such a wonderful, what is it, the incidental relationships that you build. And so I think with technology also now embracing that and making sorts of virtual spaces and virtual reality a little bit more bandwidth friendly, I certainly think we'll be able to start having some of that social cohesion and social presence much more possible in the virtual space. But we have to realize that sometimes a hug is only a hug when it's real and there's a warm body on the other side.
Exactly. It's what you do in that space. It's how you get the communication going. I mean, if you look at what's happening, how lively this discussion is, and I find myself, and it works for me because I am not a multitasker, a diverger, but I find it really amazing seeing how we've got a whole lot of conversations happening here at the same time. We've got the whole conversation in the chat box, then we've got the conversation between us here, which makes for fascinating stuff. And there actually is no way in which you can do this in any other way. I mean, what we're doing here is, it's a bazaar. There's a beautiful an article I read somewhere about the cathedral versus the bazaar, or the Lexus against the thorn tree, where in the bazaar the learning is dirty, and you get a little piece here and a little piece there, and you get what you want out of it. In the cathedral, it's quiet and it's formal, and you get only what the bishop wants you to get. And so some things you need possibly to get from the cathedral, but a whole lot is to be gotten from the bazaar. And it's how one, and that's an article I wrote about 1 million years ago called Models and Metaphors in Internet-Based Learning, where you've got to find the model or the metaphor that you're wanting to do. So what I'm seeing happening on the side here is the bazaar. And then the conversation that the three of us are having is really sort of an Oprah style, three of us sitting in easy chairs, chatting and sort of seeing what we do. So if one works the metaphor behind, and then you see, how do I put this metaphor, translate this metaphor? And of course, what's going to happen in 5 years from now is the metaphor is going to be the other way around. We're going to say, we've done all these fascinating electronic stuff. Now, how do we replicate that in the real world?
Absolutely. So I think there is a lot for us to think about, maybe not in this forum, but in other forums, about once we open up again after the pandemic, and I'm guessing 2022 we'll see gradually students coming back and things change in that environment. How much of what we've done now in the fully online space for the last 18 months will transfer or will through osmosis go into that space as well.
Exactly.
What I like seeing in our courses that are fully online and really developed well, where the learning experience has been taken care of before the actual lecture even starts.
Yes.
The teaching has happened in that course that sits there and waits. And then once the course actually starts, the 7 or the 8 week module that we're running starts, that's when the facilitation comes in. And it's a very different skill that lecturers need to learn, because now if they do open themselves up for synchronous sessions with the students, they have to be able to think on their feet. They have to be masters of their discipline. They have to be confident to lead the response. And they also have to be confident enough to say, listen, I don't know everything. Let's use the expertise that we have in the field and learn from one another, because everyone brings certain things to the party as well.
Yeah. So I'm wanting to start a new word. I actually wrote it on my blog so that it belongs to me now. Where you have constructionism that Seymour Papert talks about, where if you're a constructivist, you let people construct things, and from that construction they learn. He calls that constructionism. I'm looking at something that I want to call collectionism, where what you do, the same way as in Pokemon Go, you would catch yourself various Pokemons and grow your collection, and you would evolve them and you would power them up and you would do you'd curate your collection. That's what we as learners do. We curate our various collections, and sometimes we get rid of certain things because they are no longer relevant to us, so that we can get new ones. And so I believe that we need to look at a model of collectionism in building that collection of skills and knowledges, and of the people around you on whom you're going to draw. You mentioned the one about the vet overfeeding the Pekingese or whatever. I would not want to go to a doctor who does not belong to a WhatsApp group for whom he might ask, what about this? I read recently that the worst thing you can do is go to a doctor with 30 years experience, because they've got zero modern training. In fact, in medical training, the younger the better, because they're able to speed things up. I'm trying to see what other things people are saying here. Somebody's saying our designs are much better. Tia, talk to us.
I just think that from the lessons learned, that I did complain about lecturers not wanting to change, but in fact many did change, and we saw very innovative approaches to online learning and to students' challenges, both for synchronous and asynchronous learning, and more flexibility, less strictness, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
And I think that was that will not go away. We can definitely see that, and that's the feedback we get from our students too. And so I think the flexibility will stay.
So to get back to what Linda said, this whole and my idea of collectionism, the way in which I taught research methodology this year for advanced diploma students, they had a big fat textbook that they had to read, and I discovered very quickly that there is a really nice YouTube clip for every section in that textbook. Some are just lectures, others are beautiful little animations. If you want to look at randomness, you get beautiful animations. There are little simulations about that, etc. And so what I did was, the students I had 2 hours to see them, and the first hour I simply made an hour-long learning session on Blackboard. Watch this little 2-minute video clip, answer this five question test. And the questions I asked at some stage, when it came to scales, Likert scales and various things, I couldn't find enough distractors for Likert scale and whatever the other scale was. So eventually I added in Richter scale and bathroom scale, because the aim of the exercise was for students to read. They couldn't do the test if they hadn't watched the video. So the test was not there to test their knowledge. It's just to force them to watch the video. And then in class, all we did was discussions. And then at the end, they had to go and do an exercise based on whatever it is that they learned in the process. And so therefore, what we got was a pre-test mark, an in-class assessment where we asked little quiz sort of questions during the class, and then a post-class assignment. So for one class, I had 3 assessment points. Now, can you see what that means? A, for authenticity, but B, for reliability and validity. If you teach 20 classes with 3 assessment points, you're sitting with 60 assessment points that you can use to do some sort of test for reliability and validity on.
So, Johannes, maybe we should also, because we don't have a lot of time left, but
Yes.
One of the questions was, how do you get rid of the loneliness, you know, the isolation, and what are ways that you can create a sense of community for online only? I think that's a lot of our students struggled with that, and initially lecturers also struggled with that. Students ask for to see their lecturers. And it's interesting, many lecturers say their students never showed their faces, although they were online in great numbers. I find that actually fascinating.
I also, there's a big power dynamic with this thing, you know. I taught some classes using WhatsApp only. So I would say to students, here is an exercise, do the exercise and WhatsApp a picture of your result to all of us, and we can discuss that. So they might, I'd give them a piece of paper, a paper to read, and they'd have to do a branching tree diagram of that paper and then WhatsApp that branching tree diagram to the whole group. What I found then was it's very difficult for me to type replies to that. I could discuss that picture with them. So I would send back a voice note. So they would send up a picture, I'd send a voice note about what I thought, and they would text back thanks, or they would send a thumbs up or something like that. But never once have I ever had a student reply with a voice note. So there's a power distance thing here that students say, the professor is powerful, he can talk, but I'm not powerful, I must just listen and I can type. I don't know why that happens, and so one will have to grow that. As far as the creating a sense of community, you know, 2 things that I did was one was to break them down into tinier WhatsApp groups. So I have 60 in the main group, and then 10 groups of 6. And the 10 groups of 6 have to rank their things and then post the best one of that. That answers the question, what do you do with a big group? You convert into lots of smaller groups. And then they discuss, and then they throw that out. And suddenly, here you end up having a vibrant community that starts talking to one another. And if you look in the sidebar here, what happened, I mean, at some stage, you guys can just go back to that sidebar and just look at the community that we've already started here. You find people who have never met each other before, but they've already decided they're going to meet in the virtual space afterwards. They've already said we should write something together. So the community is up and running already.
There are quite a number of things I think one can do to overcome that sense of loneliness. I know that in all our modules we have a virtual what is it that we call them? It's like virtual tea rooms where it's really a break room where the lecturer doesn't have a presence, but where students themselves help one another. Then we also have like a hotline where you can go if you need assistance. But then under normal circumstances, the lecturer would not answer any questions in that virtual tea room. They would not have a presence there because of that power play that Johannes, you've just mentioned. You know, the dynamic, whether you want to break it or not, it's always going to be there. There's always going to be that, you know, the person with the highest ranking dominates. And so if you exclude yourself from those environments, then somehow they start talking to one another and they start helping. In one of the courses that I've taught myself, or a while ago is we gave bonus points and actually marks. It was actual marks for the helping hand of the week. So yes, we would say, go into your breakaway rooms, help one another, and at the end of the week, the group would vote on who their helping hands were. And the people who they really benefited their own learning, and if your name got listed, I think it was 5 times in that over that period, then you would get an additional 2% to your final mark.
That's brilliant, Linda. We must actually tell these people of your own doctorate. I don't know if you guys know that Linda actually played a game of Survivor with her students. And some students found the game so frustrating that they actually voted themselves off the island. So, and I remember the external examiner, I had 3 or 4 students work on this project, and the external examiner by the end said he cannot believe that so much stuff was written about this shipwreck of a course. And I then wrote a paper called Surviving the Shipwreck, Why Students Help Each Other Online. But what Linda is saying now is let's do it the opposite way around. Instead of voting the worst member off, let's reward the best member. So Linda, it's brilliant to know that you learned something from your doctorate. You must be my only student ever to have learned something out of a doctorate, out of 62 of them. Elise says she's getting an error message to get to the learning landscape. And I do believe that that could be that some institutions actually block Google sites. I'm just putting it out there, so you might want to look for it from home or something. I must do my advertising here. I think we've been told we're out of time. We have 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes.
Yeah, so if I can wrap up from my side, I think I love what's happening, as you say, Johannes, in the chat room. I've been distracted now by listening and doing. It's amazing how one learns to multitask in this environment. But I would want to go back and read what was said. I want to encourage everyone who's here also. I think there must be a way in which we can connect afterwards. I would definitely make my email address available for everyone. And if you want to be in touch, let's set up a Cumo Space afternoon and we discuss whatever issues there is. I think there's opportunities for us to work together, publish together, and just share best practices. So thank you for the opportunity from our side. Tia?
Johannes, thank you for leading us through this, and then and a smarty to you for that, Linda. But I want to really, this is a wonderful thing that you've set up here. So the idea is absolutely brilliant, and thank you for inviting all of us. And I hope this is the first of many of these conversations. I think many of our colleagues should join next time because there's a lot to gain from this. And thank you, Linda. Thanks, Johannes. And thanks, Eugenie Camara, for doing the moderation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof Grenier, Van Ryneveld, and De Wet for your contributions. I think it's evident that there is still much